Well, hi there. Welcome to the BDR Net video channel. If you would, click on the little subscribe button below. And if you click on the little bell thing, it will let you know when new videos are posted. Thanks. I'm just really pleased to have Mark Lucero with us. He's the chief engineer for FEMA IPAWS. And we have some other folks with us that are in the industry and involved. I see Harold Price is checked in. Ed Zarnicki is checked in. Bill Robertson. We have some representatives here of the different manufacturers. So the idea of today's program is to clear the air and help the FEMA and us as broadcasters understand what happened over the last 2 weeks, and then how we can improve both communication between us and the FEMA and EAS in general. That's the foundational thought here. And so, Mark, I'm just going to turn it over to you, see what you'd like to start with.
So here's the background of the issue. But first and foremost, I think the most important thing about this issue is that it only affects the weekly automatically generated FEMA RWTs that are sent every Monday. It does not affect any state or local alerts that are originated outside of the system. And I can go into a little detail as to how that happened and what's going on with that. But I'll go with the punchline first. The punchline is that, very gracious for Harold Price's assistance in troubleshooting and testing. With his help, we've been able to fix the problem. It was tested out and verified in our test environment, and we plan to deploy that fix to production tomorrow. So on Monday, you should get the RWTs as you expect them, knocking on wood here. So that's the punchline. And I can go into the gory details now if you'd like.
Well, it's how you'd like to approach this. I think there's several directions here. There's the pure technical aspect and the fact that it affects what happened and how it happened. Then there's the policy aspect and how we and you at the FEMA can interact in a better way. And so there are the three different the test with the extended characters that didn't work, the 6-0 test, and then our broken digital signature test. And if you want to address those briefly, I think that would be instructive to folks, answer questions, and then we can go on to the policy ideas of what we can do.
Okay, sounds good. So technical aspects. So the brief history, IPAWS came online in 2010. EAS feed came online in September 2011. FEMA began issuing regular RWTs on Mondays. That started in December of 2012. And then IPAWS deployed from the old system to the new system in the cloud on April 13th. And that's where everything kind of ground to a halt when it comes to the RWTs. So what was the issue? From a technical standpoint, there were two issues. The first issue happened on the first scheduled RWT after our cloud transition. We found that the RWT included a namespace in one of the cap elements that was making the EAS device choke. That was brought to our attention. We thought we fixed it, and effectively what we did is we removed the namespace. Our failure there was that we removed the namespace after the signature was already applied, silly us. And the bigger mistake that we made was that we tested internally. We didn't involve stakeholders in testing, and that was our problem. That was our fault. A lot of the reason for that is because we thought we could just kind of fix it real quick. It turned out to be one of those things where, just because it looks pretty on the outside doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in real life. So that was the first problem. We realized that fix didn't work the next RWT go round. At that point, again, thanks to Harold Price, who kind of did some reverse engineering and figured out what was wrong. He let us know, hey, look, if I put the namespace back in there, the signature validates. So that was light bulb. So we took a look at the code. Indeed, what he had found is actually what we were doing. We created the cap, we digitally signed it, then we removed the namespace, and then we put it on the feed. So that was the most recent fix, is to put them in the correct order, and that was tested and validated. So that's the technical aspect of what happened. A couple of folks in the last 2 weeks, a couple of folks had suggested, hey, why don't you just send an RWT to all zeros, and just to kind of fill in the blank, fill in the gap. And so that kind of skirts the technical and the policy, right? So from a technical standpoint, that wouldn't prove anything, that wouldn't fix anything, because it would effectively bypass the problem. As I said earlier, the RWTs are created internal to the iPlus system. They're not, anything that's external would be validated by the system. The system, if a state sends an alert, iPause validates, checks the signature. So if we were checking our own signature, then we would have discovered there was a problem, but we weren't, because it never goes through that validation step. So we could have, sent the all zeros RWT, but that would have circumvented the problem, and it really wouldn't have told us anything about and it wouldn't have, how do I put this? It would not have proved that the issue was resolved. And then policy, so FEMA is not required to send an RWT. This is something that we established back in December of 2012, really as a kind of like a check, a courtesy, I guess, for broadcasters to, that they have something they can ensure that, hey, I'm connected and things are working. And that proves to ferret out some issues with the certificate chain of trust that's installed in the box. If for some reason that chain of trust, one of the certificates expires or something like that, those issues would be found out during that required weekly test. So I guess, long story short, there's really no policy reason why we should have sent an RWT to all zeros. And then from a technical standpoint, even doing so, it would have given a false sense of security that, hey, it's fixed, and whereas it wasn't. So I can leave it at that.
Well, I'll start by saying, first of all, that I was part of the group that asked vociferously to keep those RWTs going. I think it is a service that you guys provide, and when it is out there, stations can have that security, knowing that the system is working. And when it doesn't work, well, then it's time to check your boxes, whether they have the right revision of the firmware, whether they have the settings properly. And yes, Harold has sent a file to me that we'll put up here for folks with Sage boxes to do checking. And at the same time, realizing that different things happen, whether it be the digital certificates, whether it be the checksum from the namespace, all these things play into what's going on. And then we learned something new on the second one with the digital signature, because apparently there are some, I think MNet was one that I'm aware of, and there are some LP ones that don't check the digital signature. They took that test and then passed it on with their digital signature so that other stations got it and verified it, even though theoretically they should never have seen it in the first place. This shows us where the stream of the flow of the tests come, and helps solidify the system, batten it down, and prevent problems. So I think it's all good. When we say the test failed this week and last week, I think it was a success because it showed us where things are.
Thank you for that, and I'm glad to hear you say that. That's kind of what we thought as well. I think two things that come to mind. First is communication. We use that Gov delivery service to send out information to folks who are subscribed to it. So I guess the question, is that adequate? You know, when we found that the RWT failed, we sent, as I think it was the following day, we said, hey, look, sorry, the RWT can go out. We're working on a fix. Is that adequate for your logging purposes? I thought that was going to be the right way to go.
I'll venture this, and again, folks, you're welcome. I'm sure that Mark will be happy to field your questions, but I'll phrase this one in here. Sometimes these come a little late. People on some of the lists are asking questions. I didn't get one this morning. Was it only in the East zone? Was it all zones? Some of my boxes got it. Some of them didn't get it. And once you guys discover it, maybe we could get the word out a little faster.
Okay. Take that into consideration for our operations branch, which is our engineering branch.
Well, yeah, it's not one person. You're not sitting there doing all this yourself. And, you know, obviously we're not going to throw any eggs at you or anything, but these are the things that folks, you know, need to understand. And I have seen this over the years more than once, that it starts out with a few guys, often in the East zone. Sometimes it's not the East zone. Sometimes it's the Central zone that gets missed, or there are things that happen. And yet we sort of have to run around and say, gentlemen, FEMA, is there a problem? And it would be so much easier for us to know immediately.
Got it.
With that, I'm going to invite others here to raise questions, ask questions about what happened with theirs. As we know, the first one with the namespace, that affected only the Sage units. And that's not necessarily a Sage problem. It was because the format of the XML changed. And one could ask you, all right, I'll speak for others. Is it possible that that XML should have been checked in the lab first?
Yes, and frankly, the user acceptance testing that we go through is, how do I put this? Typically, when there's a new release, the user acceptance testing that we go through typically will focus on what's changed. So there's regression testing for anything that was affected by the change in the new feature or the new function. But the testing is focused on that one change, typically, the majority of testing. With this deployment to Amazon GovCloud, this was quite a large change. This was a major change. Not only was the software changed, but the platform, the environment, the network. So I'm sorry to say that most of our focus was on making sure that the system processed messages properly that came in through the front door. We didn't focus a lot on the automated RWT generation, as evidenced by the failures that we saw. So yes, you're right. We should have captured this. We should have caught this in our lab testing. Unfortunately, we didn't. I think the failures that we saw is that we looked at it by inspection. We looked at that message and we said, yeah, it has all the elements in there. We failed to scrutinize the parts like the namespace that could have had downstream consequences. And as a lesson learned, future releases, we are going to do we're going to increase our stakeholder participation in user acceptance testing to include alert software vendors and the EAS device manufacturers. So that's kind of a major lesson that we've learned.
Good.
It'll save us a lot of headache.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's not just the FEMA, state testing, local testing. We see errors, dare I say, Hawaiian missiles, and don't want to spend too much time on that aspect, but you can never say we're going to make sure that it never happens again. That just isn't possible. There are too many ways for things to go wrong in the real world. And so the fact that you are beefing up your testing, that is of comfort to us, knowing that you see at least that little crack in the wall and we're going to plaster it. And that's great. That's fine. Uh, the 6 zeros, that should never have been an issue, again, because only for EAT right now should 6 zero work, correct?
That is a good question. IPAW's system has the ability to issue any alert with the 6 zeros for the geocode. However, will the box accept it? That's an unknown. I think the expectation is that any alert that includes all zeros would be an NPT or an EAN. However, it is conceivable that a civil emergency or something of that nature could include the all zeros. So that is something that would have to be tested with the device manufacturers.
Yes, and we'll give them a chance to address this if they want to. Ed, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, I was actually going to ask a question. Would FEMA be in a position to develop a recommended practice then for usage of the national geocode with other event codes? Right. This is an open question with the FCC. FCC doesn't allow it or disallow it. It's treated like for some of this manufacturers, just another geocode that if you want an RWP or an EVI to pass with the 5 zeros or how many zeros there are this week, you need to manually enter that in as a filter. Otherwise, your RWTs aren't looking for the 6 zeros. If it was a recommended practice or recommendation or guidance from FEMA that, yeah, all alerts should be eligible for the zeros, that's something we can organize around the industry. But right now, it's just an unknown.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And I've made a note here on that recommended practice. That is certainly something that will have to be socialized and tested with the device manufacturers, because the current thinking is that the only time in all zeros would be used is for an NPT or an EAN. However, with some recent legislative changes to include the FEMA administrator as potentially sending an alert, well, the administrator may not be using EAN and certainly wouldn't be using NPT. So internal to FEMA and in discussions with representatives from the White House, those are the questions we're asking. What are the scenarios where a civil emergency or a different event code would be used with all zeros?
It might be more than just the all zeros. It might be some combination of this originator code with this, only with this originator code would the national geocode be accepted. You don't want, obviously thinking of cyber risk, having everything eligible for national distribution makes faking these things a little bit more accessible on broadcast EAS, on legacy EAS. There's no security on legacy EAS at a data level. So there's pros and cons. And if there's a guidance, and especially if it could be an iterative process between the stakeholders, the manufacturers or the originators to develop guidance, I think that would be a good outcome of this as well.
Absolutely. It's not a guarantee or a fail-safe, but certainly it's one more hurdle that a bad guy would have to jump over in order to get something to go out. I would say that if there are any boxes out there that have that validate signature unchecked, that is certainly a larger problem. But yeah, I'll take it. I'll take that as a action here to develop recommended practice for all zeros.
And this next question, this might be also outside of your ballpark. This might be maybe an FCC question, or maybe it's out of everybody's ballpark. But for third-party disseminators who may get a CAP message converted into a proprietary format or EAS tones, and are not checking the digital signature validation. And this is one of the things that Barry mentioned earlier. There was at least one system that received the invalid message but forwarded it anyway. That's a good finding in a way, that they're not checking digital signature validation and forwarding it on anyway. How does industry, how does government encourage those types of third-party systems to conform?
Definitely, that's a question for the FCC. However, I believe, and this might have been an email from you or one of your compatriots, I think that the FCC does require that signature validation be performed before putting it on the air. That only applies to licensees, of course. That it doesn't really apply to any third party or some other external method of getting alert messages out. So when it comes to putting things on the air, that's FCC certainly. However, if it's some other medium that's not regulated by the FCC or doesn't fall under Part 11, don't know how we enforce that. But if you want a technical solution, I'll help with that. But policy stuff, leave that to Al Kenyon or maybe someone else.
Okay, that is a good point, and I think that the industry and the emergency management community do need to talk about this. And the SECC probably, although we know in some states it's totally dysfunctional, but if the SECC stopped and worked its way back up the chain and talk to people like MNet and talk to people that were doing this, we could eliminate problems that way. But it would take proactive action. I'm going to ask this again, and this is primarily with the digital signature that was broken because of the need for checking this. And I know I've asked Harold and I've asked Bill Robertson from NASDAQ. Bill, you were going to show us, I don't see that you've got your camera up and running here, but you were going to show us where the tabs are so that people with NASDAQ Monroe boxes know where to do this.
Yeah, apologize. My camera has failed me. So, classic situation when you need it. The technology doesn't appear to be working right now. So what I thought I might do though is I could quickly share my screen and just show people where the setting values are, and then also how to see the log and see the statement that the log would have. Okay.
And Harold, I'm going to ask if you want to do the same thing. We'll open up for you to do a similar show, but I'm also going to give the links that you gave me earlier, and I'm going to put it in the chat as well for people to find your statement in PDF. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so you should be able to see my screen there.
Yep.
Okay, log it into the box. Just very quickly, and I hope that sizes nicely so you can see, you go to setup, cap decode. This one is configured with the FEMA IPAWS selectors, which means it has all of the proper protocol selected and where it's going. The big part of it here is there's a advanced options tab. I'll close it real quick, but you can open it up and see what it is. That just shows you that you are set up to use a secure connection. We're using the pre-assigned IPAWS pin. A lot of people don't realize that each manufacturer has a pin associated with it, so that that's a part of the correspondence with this box with iPause. But quite simply, you just say use secure connection. You can ignore other things down here. Don't have to do anything. Don't turn these on because this says I'm willing to accept if it's unsigned. So you don't want to do that. And then this is the selection for what certificate, the current certificate that you are using. If you want more information about it, you can click it. But this is just saying I want to use this certificate. So again, big things are just making sure you're secure and you've got the right certificate selected. One thing that we also do is we allow this, which is logging blocked cap alerts. So in the event that a message comes in, you could just completely throw it on the floor and not log it whatsoever, but we actually say, hey, I want to log it. I want to see if anything comes in that is blocked. In other words, if it didn't meet the signature, I want to know it. So by turning that on or leaving that on, quite frankly, it doesn't create a large log, but it lets you see what might be in there. To find it, to see that particular event, you go to alert events. And what you can do here is, for example, we know the event happened on here. I'm using a user-defined range of alerts. And I'm saying, okay, give me the dates for the 26th. And what you can see then is all of the alerts that came in. Now, one thing that Mark had pointed out earlier, I'm just going to scroll down very quickly. I know this is just to kind of showcase a couple of things. One is to showcase where the alert was rejected. If you see it right there, it says invalid and rejected. Now, remember, I'm looking at all alerts. So this is everything. If you just casually, and I'm going to jump back up here real quick, if you start looking at just forwarded or incoming alerts or anything like that, you're not going to see it. But if I have all alerts, you're going to see anything and everything that comes in. So what's nice about this is you're indicating that the event was invalid, it was rejected. So it shows up in the log, it didn't forward it, didn't do anything, it rejected it, it was there. But also notice that, as Mark indicated, that this event, which came in from some Sedgwick, Kansas, did validate. So again, iPause was still working properly. It's just that particular test right there is what failed. But this administrative message that came in from Sedgwick did, in fact, go through the proper process and did validate. So very simple, quick, easy to do that. One thing you can do also, if you want to, is I'll just right-click this and open in a new tab, is you can see the log right here. So here's the actual text version of the log, and it does the same thing. Where is the signature validated, or if it's been rejected, you can see there. So you can actually do a quick search on this and say find reject, and it'll highlight all the rejected. So you've got everything right there.
Well, that's a good thing, Bill. And for those that don't get a test or they wonder why they didn't get a test, that would be the first thing to check.
Yep,
check the log, and they would be able to determine whether or not it doesn't say rejected, then next step, find out if you didn't get it because of the LP1 or something like that.
And then, you know, in this form right now, you can store it this way. You can do it. You can save it as a PDF. So now I can just immediately take that as a PDF and make a hard copy of it if I want to, or a soft copy, and store the PDF someplace. So there's a number of different things you can do, but I just wanted to kind of showcase that it's pretty simple. But if you're casually looking through your logs, you may not see it if you don't recognize you need to turn on all of the logs, you know, for all of it, and then be able to look and quickly find that kind of information.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Harold, I'm going to put your little URLs up right now that you had. It's in the chat box for everyone to see. You can click on it if you wish to go to the Sage Alerting System site. It's right on the front page there. Leads you to the statement and the file that we're looking at. In fact, I can show you this that Harold sent me earlier. And you can see in the yellow there, that's the message, and the links to rejecting improper messages. Harold, do you have more for that you'd like to do?
Sound check, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. No, the text on the that's pointed at by our main webpage, and the PDF file there is what you need to do the deal. We've got a way to look at events that are coming in that don't make that main log. We try and keep things that aren't real or might not be real out of the main log to avoid the kind of confusion that came up on Monday, where some people said they got it, some people said they didn't, some people got it, but it was marked as rejected. But they don't mention that when they put it online. They just say they got it. So that's part of the confusion in figuring out what happens with these things of who got it and who didn't. And if they did get it, why did they get it? Were they connected directly to some other device that shouldn't have got it, but relayed it through? So that's why it took, I think, a couple hours to figure out exactly what had happened there on Monday. Yeah, I think FEMA did a heck of a lot of testing on this beforehand. Unfortunately, you don't get a count of the bugs that were squashed on the way out the door. You only get to see the one or two that managed to sneak out. And in both cases, the Monday 2 weeks ago and this Monday, they were on it fairly immediately after it started happening. I think they are very careful, as are a lot of us, to make sure you know what's happening and what you're going to do about it before you simply get on and start making pronouncements. So while there may be a delay of a couple hours between when alerts are missed and when you find out they were missed, it's not just due to, they were busy that day. Things are in work, you don't get to see them. The FCC wants you to know what they want you to keep up. It's within about a week of what happened. So you don't need to update your log 15 minutes after an event occurred. I understand there is an interest in people getting on social media and saying, hey, did you get it? Because you want to be proactive in finding out why. But you need to allow a little bit of lag time for really understanding what's happening. Make sure you understand all the edge cases before you put on an announcement.
Now, I agree with that, Harold. I watch Monday mornings myself, and although I'm out here in the Mountain Time Zone, I look for messages from folks in the East, and clarity is important. Just because a test was missed, somebody may find that their internet connection was down. Somebody else may find that something went wrong in their equipment room. And before posting and getting everybody a little crazed, some clarity is necessary. And even some of the things published over the last few days telling people what to do, it really didn't clarify what to do if your upstream source was sending you a digital signature that was not coming from the FEMA. And so it's important to take time and understand what's going on.
So I think we've, if folks just get kind of used to letting the situation roll and gel a little bit, that's a good thing. Kudos to FEMA for being on this, being proactive about testing the fixes. I think we've all kind of learned new ways to test and validate this, so fewer kind of these problems should happen in the future. I think that's all I got to add here.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Harold. I'm going to just open it up, if you don't mind, Mark, to anyone else that might have a question that they would like to ask.
This is Harold.
Hi, Harold.
Yeah, something mentioned a while back and just recently also was this thing of substituting a digital signature when passing the message on. And that doesn't really seem like a good idea. Should people be doing that?
I'm not aware of that. Substituting a digital signature. Are you effectively talking about re-signing something and then passing it on? If that's the case, then absolutely, that'd probably not be what we want to do.
I think somebody mentioned that before. I'm not super familiar with this whole thing. So Barry, can we call out?
Yes, this is what we discovered from MNet.
Yeah, well, and others too.
It was done in the digital domain. It was done analog, right? And once you take the digital stuff and convert it to the wraps, you lose all that additional security information. That's what happened with MNet, what happened with other places. There isn't anybody who's digitally re-signing them or mucking about with the digital signatures. That's all in place and working, and that's why these alerts got tripped up, because that was happening accidentally. The signature process worked fine. What doesn't work is if you're responsible for taking one of those digital messages and converting it to analog and passing it on, you got to be sure that you're checking the digital signature. And I think that's something we learned from this on Monday, and those folks should have an opportunity now to see why it's important and make their configuration changes.
Harold, what we're talking about is a format change, going from what I mentioned before was moving the iPause cap message into translating that to SAME and outputting that as an intermediary device, the EMNet terminal. You lose, if they're not checking the digital signature, then the EMNet terminal is just passing that through. If it's the EMNet terminal at an EAS participant site, that's an intermediary device, that comes under the FCC. If it's EMNet or any other intercepting the iPause feed at their NOC as opposed to a EAS participant location, that gets fuzzy because that's outside, technically, strictly speaking, outside of the FCC's authority, but they'd have to take a look at that. I think, libertarian view here, if that's permissible anymore, is that industry should pressure the company, their customers should pressure the company to step up and update the system, make sure this doesn't happen again. EMNet's customers are primarily the state emergency management agencies. So I think in this case, the state EAS committees should ask their customers, the EMAs, to ask respectfully, update this now. Segue, Barry, you and I were talking a bit offline a day or two ago about the SBE guidance that came out earlier this week on what to do. And I had some questions or quibbles with what the SBE put out. A lot of it is very useful, but two things. Well, one I remember offhand. The suggestion that you need to correct your digital signatures by the next test, May 3rd or whatever date they put out there. I quibble with that because if you're not checking digital signatures, you're not compliant now. That's not a matter of wait till the next test. You know already your device is not conforming to 1156 and checking digital signatures. So that's something you need to call out now. Check your device. If you're reliant on an intermediary device like EMNet, and I hate picking on one company, but like that, then you need to shake the tree upstairs to the SEC saying, you know what, we're receiving unauthenticated CAP messages because of this intermediary. That has to be fixed.
Why do devices have the option to allow unsigned or incorrectly signed messages?
In our case, you saw how when Bill showed the interface, it was beta in there. Our devices are not just used for iPause, and the iPause CAP format is not just used for public alert and warning. So there are business purposes, there are customer purposes where we're not using the iPause signature. One classic one would be in a lab environment. Cable TV operations have banks of our equipment that they're doing regression testing on, and they originate messages, and it will be absent the iPause signature, and we'll let it through for lab test purposes. That's just one of many use cases why in a controlled environment you may not want to allow digital signature inspection, but in the field, in the real world, it's the law. EAS devices must be prepared to inspect digital signatures when they're present. And I still amuse myself thinking about the gap in the law where it's totally permissible to send an unsigned digital message. You can send and forward an unsigned message, but if the message has an invalid signature, you have to reject it. There is a loophole you could drive 3 trucks through.
It does point out that the necessity of stations making sure that they're compliant with the rules and their chosen manufacturer assists them in doing that. And that's the case here. We've all got a way of saying, check the signature. For iPause messages, stations need to make sure that they are checking the signature. Now, we do what we can by setting defaults and pushing, but there are cases where you want to not have the signature or et cetera. The more of those you have, the more important it is, however, to make sure you know what you're doing. In Canada, just this week, an origination vendor thought they were talking to a test system, turned out to be talking to a live system, and issued repeated tornado warnings that were correctly digitally signed. It's difficult to allow for testing alongside the actual thing, and you really got to keep track of what it is you're doing and know what you're about. To back up one step, it's also difficult for the average engineer who configures the AS and then gets on with their life of keeping the station on the air, and then a month or two or maybe a year or two later peek on the AS again. You don't really know how these messages are getting there. Some of the intermediary devices translate from CAP to EAS. There are other devices, and GSSnet is one, there are others. They take that digital message from iPOS and pass it through unchanged, so the digital signature is there. And that message is delivered directly to the endpoint EAS device. Now, in the case of our documentation, we stress if you're getting it from iPOS, you need to have digital signature turned on. But this is a case where you're getting it from iPOS indirectly. And some stations didn't have the satellite feed also marked to verify the signature. And now they know that they need to. There's a lot of different moving parts to this, a lot of different edge cases of where you're getting the message. Is it analog? Is it digital? And you need to know. One of the things that Sage learned out of this is we need more, not more documentation, but more assistance, more printed matter so that folks can take a look at it and have every opportunity to see what the right thing is, learn they need to be doing it, and learn how they need to do it.
That's
so we're
right.
trying to get better on that as well, as evidenced by the thing we put on the webpage today. Barry had pointed out the additional need for some of that stuff. We were already working on it, so we got it up in time for this meeting. But it's an iterative process for all concerned.
Communication is always good, and to get the word out to different places is always good. I'll ask this of you, Mark, and maybe Ed. Is there a list right now of, other than MNet, that passed this along? Is it something that maybe the FEMA could talk to MNet rather than have each of the state groups trying to do this?
So I can reach out to EMNet and let them know about the gravity of the situation, and give them our recommendation. I'm not aware of any other devices that also have this problem or would pass on the invalid signature.
That's why I asked,
yeah.
That's why I asked Ed. Maybe your logs show it, or
No, I see. EMNet is the single largest proprietary system that does decisive conversion, either into SAME, the legacy AS format, or their proprietary data format. Either way, what's happened here is clearly the digital signature was ignored, and they passed an invalid message, which is a good finding in an RWT and could be enormously bad with a bogus alert. That's why digital signature authentication is there. So, a call from friends, I'd be happy to call Roland too, to express the gravity of the situation is not a bad idea. There are other systems out there. Harold Price mentioned GSSnet. We've got a statewide system in Ohio that relays the CAP feed via ATSC broadcast, data broadcast. And we have intermediary devices, DXM terminals at every LP 1, 2, and 3 in the state. But in that case, the intermediary devices take the entire iPOS feed and replicate it within the enterprise. Digital signatures and capture any multimedia content and everything. So it's essentially an offline, that's not the right way to put it, but it's a parallel architecture to the traditional internet. In all those cases, the iPOS message is relayed intact with digital signatures, whether it is the entire feed or atomically each individual message signed. I'm not aware of any system that breaks things apart like EMNet. Again, I hate picking on EMNet because I like those guys, but there's a big problem here and they need to take a look at it.
So it's, I guess, I'll backtrack and again say, would you, Ed, and you, Mark, get together and prevent the need for all the SECCs to contact MNet with, 50 inquiries if they can be helped with one or two?
We can make the call. I mean, I can't speak for, we can make the call, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, if they're not doing it, then the state SECCs need to be notified, and that needs to be written into their contracts, or something has to be done so that this does not continue, I would think.
Well, I mean, I can put it in terms, maybe the government can. If you, before you have a business problem, you might want to address this.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Is the iPause signature going to be corrected by this coming Monday?
Yes, it will. That was tested and validated yesterday and today, and we plan to deploy that fix to the production system tomorrow. So it should be in time.
So you're saying there'll be an extra test this week?
No, the test will fire off. It's a cron job that runs on a specific day and time. So it won't be tested until Monday. I think Guam, not Guam. Yeah, Guam. No, who's the first one? There's I can't remember which time zone.
American Samoa.
Thank you. American Samoa is going to be the first one. That's Sunday evening, I think.
It's at 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay, because I just heard you say tomorrow and then being Friday. So
The software gets updated tomorrow. The alert gets sent on Monday.
good. Okay, excellent.
Time is relative.
Excellent. Anyone else have a comment they'd like to thank Mark for what he's been doing, what the FEMA is doing, or make a suggestion how the FEMA can be better responsive to broadcasters' needs?
I would like to, first off, comment to Mark and thank you. I did appreciate that you guys did send the 6 zeros RWT, and I think that came in on a Friday. But anyway, just wanted to let you know that from where I sit, I appreciated that you did that. Also, to Harold, yes, yeah, I saw where you had posted your instructions for the SAGE units, how to check the that you're rejecting bad certificates, and I went through that yesterday with my equipment, and it was very easy to do and well written, and encourage everyone else to take a look at that. And just wanted to say thank you, Harold. And as I had heard more than one comment about these alerts being forwarded, and they're all RWTs, and I guess I'm a little confused about what situation or where RWT forwarding would be used. They're typically just a receive only type of thing, and so I was a little confused about that. If anybody can shed some light.
Harold, want to comment on that?
Yeah.
There, in the case of MNet, and again, we don't want to drag them through the mud here, but it is useful for MNet. You've got that intermediate device connected to your other main EAS device. You want to make sure that that link works. So the forwarding of legitimate FEMA RWTs through MNet to the audio input on your EAS device, legitimate, perfect, expected, desired. That's one of the few cases, however, where one should relay an RWT. Some stations just say, well, this all seems too hard, I'll just relay everything. And we've seen a couple of those. It's not clear from the FCC rules on whether you should relay RWTs. It came up on one of the CISICs when we were talking about the handbook. And the FCC didn't want to go there. But it's there's never a good reason for a regular EAS participant to relay someone else's RWT. So in the general case, you don't want to do it. There are small edge cases where you do.
Okay, thank you, Harold. I was more thinking in terms of just the general user and wasn't, I'm not familiar with the EMNet stuff, so that was something kind of foreign to me. But yeah, that took care of it for me. I'll say I at one time I was tempted to use an incoming RWT to trigger an outgoing RWT and not have to worry about scheduling it. But of course, then I'm relying on somebody else to schedule mine for me, so that didn't seem like a good idea either. Thank you.
Well, remember what the RWT is there for. It was to prove that your staff knew how.
Yeah, yeah, like that's still a thing anymore. Yeah, that was the original intent, was that the massive number of people that we have doing all those live shifts for radio stations all were able to send an RWT. Of course, like I say, that's and as Barry has alluded to, everybody puts things on automatic now and walks away with it. So, okay, thanks again, guys.
Quick note on the RWT. I think while I agree with what Harold said in principle, I think the thing to remember is that the RWT is simply underdefined by the FCC. We can opine whether we should use it, shouldn't use it, whatever. It's just one of those many gaps in the FCC rules that we need to contend with. And a recommended practice short of regulation might be a huge idea. I don't know who would generate such a thing, but some consensus on that wouldn't be a bad thing. Just a comment for Mark Lucero. You've got everybody's EAS gear in your lab. I strongly encourage you guys to, I mean, you do use it constantly, but speaking for our company at least, we're very willing to work with you guys and see how much stuff we can break in the lab. The RWTs, the geocodes, let's push the system limit, figure out what we could and shouldn't be doing, and maybe that emerges as some guidance from FEMA to industry. Just a thought.
Thank you for that, and that is a great idea. One of the activities that we're working on now is a lessons learned for this recent deployment. What can we do better next time around? And it's going to be a huge document, and it's not just going to be shelfware. We're actually going to, this time around, we're going to take a look at that and use it. And it's interesting with this new environment, and we have a new developer. It's, the government used to do things in waterfall development cycle, and things took months to get done. And now we've got this DevOps and agile development process, so we can actually turn things around within weeks instead of months. So we have to retool ourselves to accommodate testing for stuff like that. So it's a good thing, but it also, if we can't get ahead of ourselves, otherwise things go out the door that haven't been properly tested. So I do appreciate that sentiment, and we certainly will take you up on that to incorporate some of those commercial devices and vendor solutions into our testing process.
We have a question in the chat box here. Someone just knows he didn't have a FEMA server in his Sage configuration. He's adding it, but it's asking for a location. What should he do? And don't say bring out the sledgehammer.
Bring out the sledgehammer.
I was thinking the 9mm would work, but okay.
FEMA's everywhere. Just put in everywhere. Add 6 zeros for the location.
Harold,
doesn't the location drive the part of the filtering process?
Sorry, I had a local interrupt. Can you repeat the first half of that sentence, Barry, and I can provide an answer?
he didn't have the FEMA server in his configuration. He's adding it, but it's asking for a location.
That's a do you walk to school or carry your lunch kind of question.
Is that his local area?
I don't think, well, if you're putting in the iPause server, you want the URL. You don't put any locations in at that point. Locations go in filters. I'd have that person get in touch with us directly and we'll help them out.
All right. Anyone else?
Barry, I was going to bring up one other thing too. I know that some of the other people have talked about MNET and things like that, but more to the point too, MNET in that particular respect is used as an intermediary device. So anyone that is using an intermediary device, this includes like the ones made by TFT, the ones that are made by Gorman Redlich, ones that were made by Trilithic. Any of those should be tested and verified too, because they convert the cap information into wonk wonk wonk. So if anyone is using those, or they're going to want to verify that particular thing too, because again, it follows the same basic process.
You know, that's a huge point. The TFT, I miss Daryl Parker dearly in these debates. But anybody who's got a TFT intermediary device, those are completely unsupported. You haven't been able to update a digital certificate from iPause in years. So it's either non-functional, which is one problem, or it's passing unvalidated alerts and converting it to same, just like the EMNet thing we're talking about. So again, industry should be looking hard at these intermediary devices, the few that are out there, and either figuring out a way to support them or figuring out a way to get them out of the field.
Seems like FEMA should have a once a year national bad cap message, so we can detect which systems are misconfigured.
I think we just had that.
Oh yeah, as I said, we need to do it again. It turned out to be a far better thing than anybody thought, I think.
Yeah, I noticed that Sean Donlin is online lurking out there. I was wondering if he had posted some comments about the XML. I wonder if he had any observations about all this. Or maybe he just wants to lurk. I guess that's no comment.
That's a fairly, Sean, I see you're there.
Looks like he's trying to speak, but we can't hear him.
You have to unmute. There you go. Nope, we're not. You may need to kick your microphone down there. The lower left-hand corner next to the microphone, there's an up caret, and sometimes if you move around the microphone, it's one of the things about Zoom that's annoying is that you can be all right for quite a while and then all of a sudden.
I'm looking at others. I see others that show they're muted, but Sean's doesn't show muted in his. So maybe he's got maybe he's got the mic turned down or
the computer thinks it's
something external to Zoom, possibly.
Yeah.
Keep trying, Sean. We'll wait for you.
Got to get the right input.
Let's try this microphone.
That works better.
Good.
Well, I've now changed 3 different microphones, so I have no idea which one I'm actually using, but if you can hear me. So, yeah, so the FCC changed the requirements for digital signatures, and I was trying to remember the year, but basically anything before that change requiring digital signatures, a lot of the vendors didn't use digital signatures. And I think that change was like 2015 or somewhere around there. So the older devices may still be working just simply because they don't check digital signatures at all. So that was one of those changes that the FCC added. And I think someone was asking, well, why do devices allow that? Well, that was because when iPods first started, digital signatures weren't required. So a lot of devices were sold that didn't have that. And I think even the first testing, when FEMA actually did testing, they did not test for digital signatures back in the day. So yep, this was a good test to look at all those things. The XML change is one of those interoperability things. Nobody was right, nobody was wrong. It was legal XML, but everybody uses different libraries, and each of the libraries checks the XML differently. So I think when FEMA changed from one software vendor to the other software vendor, moving to the cloud, they probably just picked a different library and had different settings. So that's what happened with the XML. I don't know if Mark would say anything about that.
Yeah, the moving from Oracle to Amazon was quite a turbulent shift. So it wasn't as simple as just picking libraries. A lot of well, I think they said about 25% of the code had to be rewritten, whereas the rest of it was refactored, meaning they didn't rewrite all of it. So yeah, the initial issue was the namespace issue, and that was simply just the way that the cap was constructed, the XML, and then everything else that was just procedural problems where we edited the XML after we applied the signature. So that was our problem.
Yeah, it was legal XML. It was just different XML, I guess. And that's why I say interoperability problems are always the hardest, because everyone is correct, but you don't catch it until you get somebody new, whether you change software or change testing.
Yeah, and as I said, our major focus was on making sure that state and local alerts were getting through properly, which they were. And, you know, it was this little routine that runs in the background that we didn't spend enough time on when it came to testing.
I think, Mark, that's a really key point that might have gotten lost in all the hand wringing and drama. That, yeah, the RWT failed, but that didn't impact state and local alerts that were going out at the same time. And
yeah, that's right. The first thing that happens when an alert comes to iPause is that we check the signature. That's the first thing that happens before it continues on processing. So had this RWT routine taken place outside of the system, we never would have had this problem. We would have seen the alert fail before it actually got processed. But because it's generated internal, it's generated after that signature validation process happens.
Yeah, and that was actually one of those changes that happened, I think, like I said, 2015, because iPods used to not check the state and local signatures incoming. So you used to be able to get invalid signatures from state and local. And around 2015, iPods started checking state and local signatures because sometimes the states wouldn't update their certificates in a timely fashion. So we're slowly making our way end to end, checking all these signatures. And it sounds like the intermediate devices are the next stage to go fix.
I do appreciate the offer to speak to the group, and you know, we remain here. You guys pay your taxes, and that pays my salary, so I work for you guys. Please let me know if there's anything you need.
Will you come back again and talk to us another time? And
absolutely, yeah, I appreciate the invitation there. Thank you.
Thank you.